Animation has always been a massive part of my life. I love the art form with all it has to offer in stop motion, 2D digital and traditional, along with 3D and hybrid animation and the creativity it can generate. Because in animation, you tell stories through movement, and storytelling is a way to share our experiences, celebrate our differences, make connections and express ourselves. I want to discuss the importance of representation in animation. In particular, LGBTQ+ representation. So I'll start off by saying that I'm bisexual. I use they/them pronouns as I'm demi-non-binary, which is where someone partly identifies as non-binary and may or may not have connection to other genders. Even though I'm queer, that does not mean I can speak for everybody in the community, as everybody has different experiences within their identities. But I can talk about the importance of representation. Because representation can affect society as a whole. It can influence people's thinking and perception of themselves and others. As we form part of our knowledge from the media we watch, this is done both consciously and subconsciously, as we build up our knowledge and understanding with the help from the media. So basically what I'm saying is, the more diverse the media is, the more accepting society will be. And animation is a central part of the media for those of all ages, but there tends to be a significant focus on the younger audiences and the next generation of queer kids growing up who deserve to see themselves on screen in the animation that they are watching, to give them the confidence to be who they are and to be proud of their identity. As having visible LGBTQ+ characters can reduce the struggle queer people face when coming to terms with their own queerness, as it gives them something to relate to. They can see someone else having similar experiences to them, and it gives them an understanding of what it means. Another impact is that it shows audiences other sexual orientations and gender identities other than straight and cis, which gives people the opportunity to learn about other identities within the community, and reduces the sense of heteronormativity in the media, where straights perceived as the default, as previous relationships shown, have typically been between men and women. And depicting LGBTQ+ themes can start a conversation, as it gives a frame of reference that allows audiences to become more open and confident and comfortable talking about queer experiences and issues faced in the community. This can counter prejudice and create an environment where people are able to gain acceptance of themselves and others, leading to a safer, more inclusive, more understanding world for everyone. But on the other hand, when there's a lack of representation in the media, like animation, it creates a gap that suggests LGBT+ identities are unimportant, which is known as symbolic annihilation, which is the idea where representation in the media signifies social existence. So if you're absent from the media, then you just must not matter. And this lack of representation is and has been used as a way of oppression. One of the main factors for this noticeable historic lack of representation was the Hays Code. The Hays Code was a set of censorship rules for Hollywood that were in place between the early 1930s and the late 1960s that meant queer characters couldn't be depicted on screen unless they were punished for their identity. Its mentality behind it and its impact was felt decades after it was abandoned. Queer coding which led to queer coding of characters to get around any possible censorship that they might later face. And queer coding is where you give a character stereotypical traits to suggest they're queer without actually stating that they are. These stereotypes are created through the character's speech patterns, mannerisms, body language, and outfits, which became markers of queerness, which can be seen in Disney's animated films as the villains are very heavily queer-coded, such as Captain Hook in Peter Pan, Cruella de Vil in 101 Dalmatians, Scar in The Lion King, Ursula in The Little Mermaid, and Prince John in Robin Hood, to name a few. As the males are presented as weak with effeminate traits, and the female characters are presented as old and devious with masculine traits. These stereotypes are solely shown as the characteristics of villains, creates a subtextual association between queerness and villainy, which can lead to this negative connection led to audiences having a negative and inaccurate perception through this repetitive portrayal, as this was the only representation they were exposed to. Queer coding like this can be harmful, but today for some LGBT+ individuals who grew up watching these entertaining characters who were full of personality, it had a big impact as it did give some visibility to being queer. But we also need LGBT+ characters as leads in their own right, because can you imagine seeing someone like you being the hero of their own story? Because it cannot be underestimated the power of watching a queer character on screen. Over the recent years, there has been an increase of representation in animated films like Wendell and Wild, Flea, Katie and Mitchell's vs. the Machines, and in animated TV shows like The Owl House, with the wonderful relationship between Luce and Amity, and the non-binary representation of Rain Whispers. And Dead End Paranormal Park, the trans representation of Barney, and the representation of Norma and Logs as queer people of colour. And in The Dragon Prince, with the depiction and development of the relationship between Amaya and Queen Janai. These shows are incredible, but there needs to be a continued push for more LGBTQ+ representation, as we have come such a long way, and I know there's so many stories left to tell. Some ways which we can continue to improve LGBT+ representation, other than not cancelling queer shows, is by educating people on the importance of representation in all forms of media, for all marginalised groups, because representation matters. Another way, which is going to sound obvious, but employ queer people. Employ queer people to tell queer stories. Employ them in lead roles in the industry, like showrunners, directors, writers, artists, everyone involved in the production to create amazing queer animation and wonderfully well-developed queer characters. Give them a space to tell their stories and share their experiences. Because representation is so important, as it has the power to change people's thinking. Thank you for listening.